right. I appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully it'll be worth it. Hopefully you'll get something that'll help your defense in terms of structure and recognizing some of the problems that you may have that we definitely have in terms of what we're trying to prepare for each year and what we see differently from year to year and in terms of different motions, formations, unbalance, tempo, all of those things, which to me individually are not huge problems, but collectively sometimes they are. So we want to always try to make sure that we're being as simple as we can and trying to figure out what those problems are and come up with the best answers that we can. Again, everybody gets on here and talks to about Justin and how great a deal this has been for coaches. I haven't got to see as many as I wanted, but I've got to see quite a few. I just watched part of the one before with Bill Curry, who's was an influence on me as a young coach when he was at the University of Kentucky, and just an awesome presentation. And the bad thing about that is I got to follow him, and hopefully I'll be able to give you something that will be worth your time. So with that, we will get rolling. Here's a little bit about our program. We have an all-boys school. It's a private Catholic school. We have a huge number of players, usually upwards of 250 players in grades 9 through 12, about 100 freshmen and about 150 in grades 10 through 12, which is a great problem to have, but it's also a problem that it is a problem in terms of being able to practice an organization and that kind of thing. We're in the biggest division in the state of Kentucky. We've won 9 state championships. The last one was a long time ago, as you can see. And we've got a couple of programs in our state, and then we play some out-of-state schools, specifically Cincinnati St. X. That's a great nationally ranked program that we are trying to close the gap. We are good year in and year out. Sometimes we're a little bit better than that, but we still got to be able to get better, especially defensively, to catch up to those guys consistently. So to me, defense today, it is not simple. It used to be just, run and hit, block, tackle in terms of the game. And it has become, for the reasons that we all know, if we coach defense, more complex, more difficult, and all of these issues added together in terms of a team we are playing, or you take a schedule together and try to structure your defense. I think it's always going to be issues that are going to be complex that you got to try to make simple. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what this presentation is about in terms of what we try to do to make our scheme simple and adaptable to what we're going to see. So, humility is huge in terms of everything that we do. But I think the challenge is, as a defensive coach these days, at some point in time, you're going to face some great offenses. And it's going to teach you to be humble if you are not. And hopefully get the ability to embrace the challenge that you enjoy facing great offenses and enjoy those things that go along with that in terms of trying to get the team structured that way, trying to coach your players to be able to handle all the things that they may see on a Friday. So here's our complex problems. And I know for some of you all, you're going to look at this and say, I don't see many of those things. Or you may say, well, our structure and our defense, these things don't bother us. To me, these are, again, individually not that big a deal, but collectively, they create issues for us in structuring our defense and coaching it in the summer and installing everything, and then moving from game plan to game plan, week to week by opponent. So obviously, we're going to see multiple formation motion shifts. Everybody sees that stuff, the RPO stuff, but then combined with a lot of the huddle tempos. And when I say that, it's not just no huddle or hurry up or check at the line, that kind of stuff. We're still seeing some, getting in a huddle, breaking the huddle, and then different tempos in terms of that with the snap counts, and especially the sugar huddle, where they're up there close, running to the ball, snapping the ball quickly, even right as they get set, or really not set, and the officials aren't calling it. And then also, simulating that and then going on hard counts, that kind of stuff. I don't know how much unbalanced many of you all see. I think that it's becoming more of a thing. The MAC Canada offense is, something that we started seeing more of probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and some of our opponents have gotten to the point where we're seeing tons of it. I'll talk about that a little bit, how we structure that, not necessarily how we structure it as much as what we do in terms of our teaching and how we go about that. Again, everybody's seeing the hurry up, no tempo, or hurry up, no huddle stuff, and the check with me stuff that goes along with that. And we also see some of the things at the bottom. So that's not all of our opponents, but we still have to be able to line up to those things and have a plan and have a defense that makes sense and not trying to change it from week to week. In terms of looking for improvement, these are things that I've experienced, our coaches have experienced on defense. Sometimes in the middle of the game, we're in a deal and you don't have an answer. And sometimes we got to try to find a better one within the series during the game, in between the series during the game, from week to week during a season. And then obviously right now, off season, trying to find better answers for the big picture of what we do on defense. So identifying those problems is huge, right? Like sometimes we can't identify the problems unless we really go back and study that film. I'll talk about that in a second. Some things that we do to try to recognize some of those things. I think that we all got to look at the things that we don't see, some of the things that we don't understand that other people may be doing, or offensively what we don't understand. And then when I say my weaknesses, I mean like our whole staff, our personnel. And then me personally as the defensive coordinator, trying to motivate our players, trying to motivate our coaches, and then organize what we're doing as well as we can. The specific strategy of our enemies are huge. You can look at their film and see what they're doing, but then combined with year in and year out, what's an offensive coordinator doing, what's he like to do with his best players, and then you scheming up the personnel stuff that you're going to see from year to year and week to week. And then obviously always be humble enough to look for better answers. And that's why we're all here right now. So these are some questions that we try to ask ourselves when we're, going through the process in the off season right now. We're always going to say that we're simple, sound, and flexible. What does that really mean? And whose definition is that? And, to me, that is, can your players play it? And do you look like you can defend the field in terms of vertical and horizontal, and flexibility in terms of what we're going to see when we see all these different formations, motions, and that kind of deal. And then is there a possibility that we can be great at our technique in terms of being able to keep our eyes where they're supposed to be and play our technique and not be distracted by all of those bells and whistles and that kind of thing, in terms of guys moving all over the place and trying to distract you defensively to be able to gain an advantage, whether it be numbers or movement or that kind of thing. So, and then we're trying to eliminate the conflict with our players. We want run first players, we want pass first players, we want people to be able to know who the fourth player is, what the direction is going to be, and try not to have too many keys and too many places where their eyes are looking all over the place. So our answers, and again, simple ain't easy, right? We'd like to think it is, we'd like to say that it is, but it's really not for us. So, I got this phrase from somebody a long time ago: play defense, not defenses. And that's what we try to do. We try to major in a couple of things I'll talk about in a second. It's not really a scheme talk, but just so you get an idea where we're coming from. And we're going to play those things and try to align those things and do it against everything that we see, and then throw a few more things in there as change-ups. So, we got to know what are our weaknesses. And I don't know that anybody has any scheme that can stop everything, unless you just got better players, obviously, than other people. But we got to know what those weaknesses are and how people try to exploit them, and what we're going to do to either help cover up that weakness or throw a little change up in there so we're not in the same thing all the time. The ABC, obviously everybody is huge in terms of communicating with their players, and not just communicating with their players, but them communicating back to us and with each other, which again, we'll cover some of that in a second in terms of in this presentation. And the last one, or the second to last one, I'm sorry, to create scenarios, those are huge, and being able to create those scenarios in practice are, that's something that we've tried to study from year to year and think that we got a pretty good handle on. Some of those things doesn't always relate in terms of the game and our performance, but we think it's some of the best things that we can do practice wise to be able to do the last one, which is run fast, hit hard, and that's what we all want to do. So we got to eliminate some of that noise to be able to do that. So here's the way we look at these things, right? Identify our problems, and we started doing this at the end of the season. So, excuse me, we got 3 clips first that we look at. What are the long passes? What are the long runs? And what are our busts? And then try to look at it individually and say what issues are coming up. Is it a scheme thing? Is it a players thing? Did our guy just get beat? And is it coaching? And sometimes it's all of those things, right? Sometimes it's one more than the other. We try to put it back on us and say, what could we have done different, and what can we do to limit those things and be able to overall play better defense, obviously. we're going to learn to coach our scheme better by trying to visit places that run similar to what we run, right? And you can see we're an odd front, and we play slant and angle, reduction defense, and those are some of the places we've been in the last few years, and coaches have been great in terms of helping us and us learning from them. And so it's more for us about how we're doing stuff and not adding. We're going to add some stuff. We're going to add some different things, some different calls, and some different ways to adjust the formations, that kind of deal. But we're always going to try to look at, how big a package do we want, and whatever we're going to put in that's new or change, is it going to be worth the time investment? Are we going to see it show up during the season? And this is a phrase that I learned from a great football coach, Kerry Combs, who's now at Ohio State, run fast, hit hard. Don't ever forget that that's what we're trying to do on defense. And we try to tell our players that all the time. Just a little quote from George Patton that goes through that. And I think that it's critical that they always learn and always remember in the back of their head that that's what we're trying to do, right? And we got to go through all of these things in order to get our mind right and get our feet in the right place and be able to see the right thing that allows us to run fast and hit hard. So here's where we start, right? We're going to start by installing our schemes and organizing those things, knowing that we're going to try to make the complex simple, and we're going to try to show our players all the things they need to see to be able to do what we ask them to do and be as sound as possible in terms of what they're doing. So, the terminology thing, we've been on about a 6-7 year journey to get our terminology consistent as much as possible. And boy, it's hard. I'm going to talk about, I got a slide on one of those in a second, and that's a constant thing that we are always trying to get better at in terms of the way we're communicating, making it as simple as possible, using as few words as possible. That way kids don't have to remember a whole bunch of things, and we're also not saying different stuff that confuses them. Try to have a sense of urgency in everything that we do in terms of that, being able to not waste time, whether it be in meetings and practice, that kind of deal. And, to me, I've been coaching for 30 years, and I have learned over a period of time from a lot of great coaches how to ask players questions, and I'm still trying to get better at it. But I think that, we got to ask them, and they got to be confident enough to give us the right answer, not just a yes or no answer. And, we got to continue to probe them a little bit to find out what we think, what are they knowing? And then, can we give them input? And are there ways that we can give them input where we can ask them questions of what do they think is the best, the simplest way, whether it be a technique or how to say something, or the communication or what the call is, or all of those things. And to me, again, as somebody's been coaching for a while, learning what is difficult in our scheme is truly an advantage, because now I can teach a kid this is hard, and I'm not going to expect them to get it right all the time. I'm not going to expect it to be perfect from the start, and I'm going to explain to them why it's hard, and then, what are our answers to try to make it easier for him in terms of whether it be his skill level or his ability to process what's in front of him and be able to see a key and be in the right spot and play his right technique. So, this is a simple thing, and one of our coaches talked to me yesterday, said, don't talk about philosophy forever. I said, okay. But I think that, again, in terms of the simplicity, I'm not going to read these to you, but you can see everybody on defense is trying to do the same thing, right? We're doing it different ways, but we're all trying to be physical. We're trying to tackle well. We're trying to pursue to the ball. We're trying to make sure that we have guys in the right gaps, in the right zones, all of those things. Whether you're a pressure team or a zone team or an odd front or even front, doesn't matter. But to me, these are four simple things that our kids can spit back to us, and it can be something that they hang their hat on in terms of, yes, I know what we're supposed to be doing. Now, how does my position and what my coaches tell me to learn, how does it relate to these four things? And to me, there's everything that we teach can relate back to all four of these things for every position. Most of the time, to keep the passing game in front of you is more of a DB. Obviously, we can tie that into some other stuff in terms of rush and that kind of deal with what we're teaching our players. So when we're talking about communication, I said this a second ago, and I can't tell you too many times, that, streamlining, simplifying the language that we use is critical. And, there's an example about the spill and the wrong arm, and I can't tell you how many years, coaches were using both of those two terms on our staff with our players. And really, you look back at it and step back and you say, all right, how many times were we confusing our players? They thought that was two different things when it really was the same thing. So we're going to keep that in terms of consistent as possible, and then trying to keep our coaching points, techniques, drills, all of those things, and then again continue to look at it and say, is it simple? So when we look at things, everything that we do, there's going to be a PowerPoint, there's going to be an install. Sometimes it's a huddle deal. Sometimes it'll just be something that we send in huddle messages that are going to be installed the next day. But you're always going to get this, whether they can put their eyes on it somehow, some way before, right? And so we have a big long PowerPoint with some video clips about our teaching stuff for our Hawk tackle stuff. We have a Hawk call, which again, that's probably not the best thing in the world. We got one word for two different things. We're calling Hawk, the bottom right-hand rectangle there. That's our word for it's a passing down. So we're in pass rush mode and we're in coverage mode, that kind of deal. So there's a teaching to that. Obviously, we have one for each one of our positions. We have a terminology list. And as I say that, I'll get to the next slide. So this is a glossary of every word that we use that we think is important for our players to learn. And what are we trying to do in terms of define it and then make sure that our players understand it, right? You can see the list of things that we have in there. I've got a couple of different examples in here. I've already talked to you about the spill thing, that, how many people are calling bootleg, waggle, naked, whatever else. And, so those are things that we try to put one word instead of two, if we can, make it a short word, and we're all saying the same thing. And again, I think that anybody that thinks they're communicating well with their players and has a good culture of communication, I think if you go back and you look at all of those things, you'll find that the people who do it the best, they may or may not have a glossary, a definition, PowerPoint stuff, but at least their coaches are saying the same thing and meaning the same thing. So that's something that, again, we're on a quest to make that better, and it's taken a while, but it's something that we work at every year and every off season. And then as we're going through our teacher progression, and even during the season, we're talking about it as coaches to try to get it where it's consistent. So when we're talking to our players about communication, first of all, it's hard for them to communicate if they don't know what they're expected to know and learn, right? So you got to have the confidence that they've learned what we're expecting them to, and then we encourage them and tell them it takes some courage to ask questions, especially at the age that they are, and the fact that they don't want to be, considered to be a dumbass, and they want people to be confident in their ability to be able to know what they're doing. So we try to encourage that as much as possible. Talk to them about verbal communication, which is obviously not the easiest thing in this day and age of electronic and text messages, that kind of thing. We make them do hand signals. That's more of a coverage thing than anything else. We're not going to make the front do that, but it's a verbal and a visual thing. Talking during the plays, we talk about all our post-snap communication, and me, that's a harder thing for them to do. They want to, we get them to be pretty good at recognizing things pre-snap and getting them what we're supposed to be, but then calling out route combinations and helping each other out in terms of zone coverage. It's something that we try to get our players to do as much as possible, and talking as loud as possible, because that reflects confidence in what they're saying. So to me, we got to look at the obstacles, and I don't want to sound like a coach that's really old and been doing this for a long time and saying the youth of America is different today than they used to be. But and I don't know that they're different, but the world is different. And obviously, they're not watching football. They're not playing backyard football. They don't know, when I say they, that the general kid doesn't know as much football 101, just basic knowledge. Obviously, most of what they're learning, they're playing on Madden and that kind of deal. So we try to look at that and know where we're starting them, and kind of assuming that they don't know anything when we start from day one. Make sure that they think it's simple and clear by asking them over and over again, and trying to pull out information that they know and think is simple from them. And then, we believe that if we're saying fewer things and everybody is saying the same thing, that everybody's learning faster. We're coaching faster on the field and in meetings, and we're spending less time, and they are getting more out of the time that they spend in the meetings and on the field. And again, back to the questioning thing, I know I got a lot of PowerPoint, slides, and and it's got bullet points on there about asking questions, but that's just a little backup in case I forget it, and also something that hopefully, it's something that we think is that important that we're going to keep on pounding it into our coaches and our players as much as often as possible. And just like anything else, we're going to try to record great conversation or great communication by praising them and making examples of them and that kind of deal. So, a lot of people do this. They have the same teaching for all the things that they're doing. So all of our positions are talking about pad level and using the same techniques for block destruction, keys, leverage, pursuit. You can use that. We're just trying to keep it where the positions aren't that different in case a kid changes from one to the other, and our coaches can coach up circuits and that kind of thing by using the same verbiage and the same communication. This is a quote that I saw. I got an opportunity to go to the Patriots facility a couple of years ago. I had never seen this quote before, but it tells you a lot about, whether it be communication with players and coaching or teaching or whatever it is, because a lot of times we think that something has happened in communication. We think somebody's got it, but they really don't. So this isn't a scheme talk, but this is just so you know where we're coming from. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but basically we line up field and boundary. We're in an odd front. We reduce or slant angle our front. We play quarters when we're going to the field. We play 3 deep when we're going to the boundary. We play mostly zone coverage. We got a split field system that I'll talk about in a second. And, we don't do a lot. Again, we're trying to stay simple, but we're also at the same time try to be as flexible and sound as possible and be able to adjust to what we're seeing. So this is our call we use more than anything else. Again, angling to the field, playing our quarters toolbox, and then the opposite is we're angling to the boundary and playing third. So, our scheme includes these things. We're going to have a split field system for our 3 deep and our quarters. We're going to have some change-up calls in terms of some 4 and possible 5-man rush stuff. We've got a short yardage goal line deal. Sometimes that's a sub thing. Sometimes it's not, depending on our personnel and what we're seeing. We got a passing situation calls where we're going to get after them a little bit. We're going to do some moving around and showing some different things, and we call that our hawk deal. And then unbalance, which we'll get into in a minute. Just like a lot of other people, we have an acronym that talks about the things and the progression that they need to learn to play their spot, right? I don't have to read that to you. You can see it, but it's something that there's very few things I think that we have in our program that we think it's important enough for our players to go back to and be able to spit it back to us. And I think that, our 4 defensive philosophy things that I showed on the slide prior to that, and then also our sack rat, most of our players can go back and tell you what that is and how it relates to how we play defense in their own position. So some of the formation obstacles are some of the things that we see, right? And again, this is nothing earth-shattering. I don't think we have to see things that most other people don't. But, you used to see a couple of different variations of trips. Now, if we wanted to break down our trip stuff that we see from year in and year, or for over the course of a year, probably be 19, 20 different variations of trips. So how are we defining those, and then how are guys getting in and out of those different variations of trips, whether it be from personnel or in motion and motion in and out of them. And then the motion stuff, like who's going in motion, right? And then what's it look like? Is it fast jet? Is he bouncing? Is he running? So those are things that we're trying to define in those PowerPoints so our kids can understand and put some kind of label to that as something that we can tell them what we're seeing and what they're supposed to be doing about it, how it affects their alignment, their technique, and then possibly what our call is behind in terms of the toolbox that we're using. And then, the unbalanced stuff that, again, we'll get to in a second, and something that this past year we saw much more of and kind of gave us some problems at different times is all of the wing variations, whether it be tight end wing, 2 tight ends on the ball. It's all 4-man surface stuff, right? Somebody's on, somebody's off, or both guys are off, or both guys are on. But that's creating an extra gap over there and creating some issues with how we line up and how we're gapping out in our deal. So we're trying to tell our players that we are going to split field. Everything that we see is going to be one form of these, even though there's multiple variations of twin, split, all of those things. But those are things that we're trying to define and make it easy for our players to be able to make a call on their side of the field. And then our split field system, again, this is not a scheme thing, but in our quarters deal, we're playing a read quarters, we're playing a read 2, we're playing like some sort of man concept, robber stuff, and then, kind of just zoning off and being able to read the quarterback. So we're playing one of those things on all four sides, on both sides when we're in our quarters coverage. If we're in cover three, we're playing one of these three in terms of what we're doing. So every down, like a lot of other people that play split field, both sides are making a call, corner, safety, and inside, outside linebacker communicating with each other to know what our call is. Obviously, the difficult part is not just the first call, but the second or even third call when we start getting different formation shifts, motions, etc., that make us change our call because that formation side is different. So we've got a default side, or I'm sorry, a default call for both of those two sides, and that's what we're going back to. If there's confusion or you don't know what to call, the safety knows. He can't be wrong if he calls our default. We want to teach our players the strengths and weaknesses of each, so they have more confidence in what they want to play, and then that makes it easier for them to comprehend what we want in different things, whether it be because of the formation or because of the tendency that the team that we're playing that week is showing. So we might want to be in one of those calls more so than another, or define it a little bit differently from week to week. And then the most difficult part is when everything starts to change, right? Like, when does it change? Guy goes in motion, it changes from trips to plans on his side. At what point does it do that, and what's the timing, and when does that happen in terms of the communication? So the first thing that we do, this is just one of the slides that we have off of our motion shift PowerPoint terminology stuff. So this isn't all of them, it's just an example. So if a guy's going fast across, like, when are we going to tell our players that that thing's going to change? When it gets clearly outside the offensive tackle or tight end. And then the trade stuff is the trade, right? We know that they should get a second to be able to get set, have to have a second to get set. I don't know about you guys in your areas, states, the officials. This has become a more difficult deal, right? There's, both guys aren't on or off clearly all the time. A lot of times we'll get a shift or a trade from one side to the other, and he won't be set for a full second before they snap the ball. So as much as we try to tell our players that they have a little time on a shift, sometimes they don't. So we want to be able to recognize that, put a little sense of urgency in them. And then you see the one at the bottom, everybody's seeing this Y-off, sniffer, hopping around, motion stuff. So we try to teach them that, that guy's probably not going to take off running. He's probably not going to get too far outside the box, so it's not going to change the formation much, but it still can. Some of what we mentioned earlier were, what's hard. So going back to what's hard in our quarters coverage is beaters, right? If we're in our straight quarters, read quarters deal, we know that there are beaters out of that formation that make it more difficult to play our technique and play our deal. So this is something out of our coverage PowerPoint and our safety and our corner PowerPoints that tell us, what are these things, and then what are our answers. And we'll go into more detail with that with our players and say, if they're going to run, two switch verts with those guys, like the third one over from the left, they're going to run switch verts a bunch of times. We're going to try to recognize what are the splits in those deals, and we have some calls in our toolbox that can help that out. So we're not just going to sit the same thing and let them whip our ass doing the same thing over and over again. So recognition and communication, and going back to the sack rat, the stance, alignment, key, etc. thing. So, our learning environment needs to be comfortable first so they can pick it up and learn it. And then we tell them, we're going to start creating it where it's uncomfortable for you, because that's going to be a game situation or a learning deal for you. So we got to try to create that in practice. This leads us into like our install, form rec, calls, checks, whatever period you want to call it. We just call it 11 lines. I'll get to it in a second in terms of how we organize it. But, we want to get them ready and teach them the recognition communication thing, and then start simple and add it. This is, I'm not going to read this to you, but it's a great quote from the U.S. military that talks about the very last thing: create a demanding and learning environment for your players. And that's something that, to me, if they know we're not the only ones trying to do this, right? And if we can learn from the U.S. military some of the ways that they best teach their players in difficult situations, I think that, it's something that we can all have a level of respect for, and also it adds some credibility to what we're trying to do with our players and how we're trying to do it. So our 11 lines, it's our install, it's our opponent prep, it's that. And this may not be much different than you all. We've got an issue with the number of players that we have, and also all the time that we feel like we've got to spend on all the multiple stuff that we see and be able to show them as much as possible, and as many of our players that get as many reps as possible. So, we've revised this a little bit each of the years that we've tried to construct it like the diagram I'm getting ready to show you. So it's not earth shattering, but it's the best that we've come up with and learned from other people on how to do it. So we've got a coach being the quarterback. He's going to line up the skill players. We're not going to use a card for this deal. We're just going to, again, I'm usually the quarterback. If somebody's going to screw it up, I'd rather it be me. So everybody is going to take 3 full speed steps. Nobody's just going to stand there and, do a walkthrough deal and just be, somebody that doesn't move around. We're going to try to teach our players a sense of urgency and how to do this and how to line it up. The offensive linemen are going to do one of 3 things. They're going to go zone right, left, or pass. And we got a coach that's telling them how to do that or what to do in terms of what the direction they go or pass set. And every coach is engaged and every coach is trying to move players around and coach players. And we're trying to make it as active and kinetic a period as we possibly can. So guys aren't just standing there taking a step and going through the motions and getting bored and that kind of deal. So here's our setup for the deal. We've got 11 cones. I'm going to try to use this little deal here. And hopefully I'll be able to use it without screwing it up too bad. So this is behind the offense. So this is obviously back here behind the offense. So we've got 11 cones set up, and those guys are all in line by position right there. So we've got a coach being the quarterback right there, and we've got an offense lined up. And those offensive players are defensive players, obviously, and that's why you see the different symbols for those guys. So when we first start the drill, we may start it where our 1 defense goes out on defense first. Our number 2 defense goes on offense first. And everybody else is behind the cones, and they're watching what's going on. And then the rotation after we go 2, 3 snaps, which the average is 2 for this deal, is the lines go. And we'll all rotate this way. So they go from behind the cone to offense. They go from offense to defense. They go from defense to back behind and get behind the cones again. So here's our deal in terms of what we're doing structure-wise. So no's always going to play center. It's aligned. You can go back and see it. I'm going to flip back to it in a second, but you can see this list that adds as little moving parts as possible in terms of guys having to remember where they go. It's also giving basically like our inside linebackers are our guards, and our inside linebackers are keying the guard, right? So hopefully when they're playing guard, they're learning something about playing linebacker at the same time and not just being a guy who moves 3 steps and doesn't do anything. So we also have a guy to signal the offense. It's not the free safety every time. Sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a signaler, but I think that our players learn better in terms of learning the signals and have a little bit of appreciation for the tempo and timing we're trying to get in this deal if they're the signaler at some point in time. A little key to that is, sometimes it's a little tough for those kids to signal, especially if they're the nervous type or that kind of deal. So we want to make sure we keep that in mind as we're doing that. So when we're signaling our calls, we got 3 calls, right? So it's field angle 4. There's 3 hand signals there. And what we'll do is we'll give the 3 signals with our hands, and then we'll point at the whole defense, and then we clap. I'm an old school, sort of old coach now. So I remember when we all used to huddle all the time. Bill Curry just talked about it in a previous talk, if you listen to that. So we still want to break like we are breaking the huddle. So we try to get them all to clap together, and it's something that we got to go back and practice over and over again in the beginning. But it's telling us that they all got the signal, and if I didn't clap and I didn't get the signal and I heard the clap from everybody else, I better find out who it is, right? Or better find out what the call is from somebody else. So all the players that are not in the drill, excuse me, they're looking at the signaler and they're getting the call and they're breaking the call too. So we think that adds a little bit of engagement from everybody. In other words, all of these guys back here, they're all looking at the signaler right there. And so everybody has to be engaged in the deal. Everybody has to know the call. And it's not just somebody giving them the call and telling them what it's supposed to do. So here's our structure. This isn't always the same. This is just an example of what we would do. So one of the coaches is the quarterback. One coach is really hustling guys in and out. All the coaches are still coaching their guys. A lot of times the inside linebacker coach will be this guy that gives the offensive direction just by going right, left, pass. and he's standing right behind them, so he can coach his linebackers and see what guard key they're getting and where they're going and their steps, etc. The DB coaches are in the back, and they're constantly, talking to our 4 DBs about signals, communication, and that kind of deal. So, we think that if we get 2 or 3 reps and rotate, guys are moving. So it's not just guys standing there, especially in the summertime when it's hot and guys don't want to stand there, the whole time and just start checking out, right? So try to get as much movement as possible. When we do these things, in the beginning, we usually focus on 1 or 2 calls versus base formations. Then we start to put more calls in, start adding more formations and more motions, moving the ball from hash mark to hash mark in the middle of the field, putting formation into the boundary, all of the things that cause us issues. We know if we're doing this period, it's going to be something that's different than it was the day before when we're going through the summer and installing. During the season, we'll do our form rec and check periods, which I'll talk about in a little bit, basically the same way. And it just keeps everybody engaged as much as possible. Our DB coaches can move guys around to adjust the receiver splits, where they have to change not just their alignment, but they also have to change their call in terms of their toolbox call, that kind of deal. So it's something that we're always trying to keep our coaches, with moving, coaching their guys, attention to detail, and trying to get them to engage their players as much as possible. So sometimes when we got a lot of players, right? So a lot of times in the summertime when we're doing this, for example, if we have a 15-minute period, the first 10 minutes will be just varsity guys, and the last 5 minutes will be JV guys. And we flip this thing around where these will still be our JV players up here. There might be 2, maybe even 3 deep in our JV guys, which I know a lot of guys don't have that many players, so this may or may not apply to you. Our varsity guys will be in 11 lines back behind the defense. And what we're trying to do with that is make them coach the young guys. So the young guys it's a more simple deal. We're keeping it basic. We're going to ask JV players questions, right? And if they don't know the answer, then we're going to hold the varsity players accountable. So that kind of gets them a little bit more engaged in terms of them being able to want to coach the players that are in front of them and get their eyes in the right spot, get their stance right, get their technique right, at least get their first 3 steps right in terms of that. And in addition to that, it adds a little bit of community to the position and gets a little bit more of older players engaging with younger players and helps the culture of our defense, I believe. So if you look at this slide, I'm a firm believer in trying to do this. We're not smart enough in terms of defensive coaches to be able to have a ton of schemes and an answer scheme-wise to everything. So we're going to try to be as fundamentally sound as we can and follow Chuck Noll's advice in terms of that. So the next thing we'll talk about is unbalanced. So we see 2 of our better opponents are going to play a bunch of unbalanced. I'm going to say greater than 25%. That's not every year, but for the past 3, 4, 5, we've seen an increase in the amount of unbalanced. One of the better teams that we play really is closer to 50% than 25% in terms of, the way we define unbalanced and what they're in. We're not just seeing 1 or 2 versions of unbalanced. We're seeing multiple, and some of it is 4 receivers, some of it's 3 receivers. You can go through your personnel groups, whether it be 21, 11, all of those things. But, it's kind of a little bit harder to define when it comes to the unbalanced stuff because we're all on the same side and that kind of deal. So we're still seeing some tempo out of that. A lot of times people want to try to dick us by running to the ball as fast as possible in an unbalanced set and try to get us outflanked. And one of the teams we play is the great stretch team, and that's one of the things that they try to do a bunch is run up to the line out of the sugar huddle and run stretch right away before we can recognize it, before we can get checked, and before we can get moved. So those are things that we have to practice and make our players aware of. It's something that we begin in the summertime with the things that we're going to see the most. Put our checks in, put our communication in, start working it, and be able to adapt it and move it from check to check, or what we're doing in terms of in terms of week to week versus different opponents and the different unbalanced formations that we're going to see. So the first thing we're going to do is try to teach our players what an unbalanced is, and that's as close to consistently from what we see as to make it as easy as possible for our players. And I've talked to a lot of people about, what is unbalanced to you and what are you doing to it? And I know some people don't have, either they don't see a lot or they just say, we're going to play what we play. And I think that we see enough of it where and get hurt and outflanked enough, just trying to play our regular deal and not make any adjustments or any recognition or communication to it, that we would get outflanked consistently. So that's why we've tried to develop this and spend some time doing it. So also know, we're still going to be able to get into stuff that doesn't fit this definition. And then it's a deal where, our players are asking, well, this is unbalanced. It's not, that kind of deal. So again, we want to line up, run fast, hit hard. So we're going to try to teach and try to, show them what we want. And then hopefully they'll make the best decision about how that's going to go and what it's going to be. All right. We're going to give them the why. Like, why do offenses do it? Here's our answer. We're going to work the hell out of it. We're going to try to recognize stuff, communicate, and be able to, show hand signals with the use signal. Have a check for the front. Recognize who the guy is. Because if it's an unbalanced formation by our definition, there's going to be an ineligible player over there somewhere. And again, sometimes it's hard to see when in terms of looking out there and seeing 4 receivers out there on one side or 3 receivers and who's off and who's on. Because sometimes they all look like they're off. Sometimes they all look like they're on. And so recognizing those things as much as possible and understanding who the guys that can see it, right? So these are some things that we've run into. Like, we have a default call, right? We're going to go into a game, or we're going to go into a summertime. We're going to say, this is our easiest deal this year. And I'm going to show you a slide in a second of all the things that we've done. And that's really things we've done in the past 4 or 5 years. We're going to go into a season with one default call, and then probably a backup. And then as we go through the season, we may throw a second one in there, a third one in there. So it's just dependent upon what we're seeing, how much, and then who we're playing. And a lot of times, a couple of our best teams or a couple of the best opponents we play, we're going to play them twice. We're going to play them in the regular season and see them again in the playoffs. We may switch it if we're going to see a lot of that stuff, which hopefully makes sense to you. So these are some of the issues, right? So how are we going to get in and out of the different checks that we have? If we go into a game, we have 2 of them. Is it going to be because it's a 2-back deal versus a 1-back deal? Is it going to be we're going to change it from series to series or after a quarter or that kind of deal? What are we going to do if they're in unbalance and they shift out, which is one of the most difficult things to be, that that we have to practice over and over again. And are they going from unbalance on one side to unbalance on another with a multi-man shift? Or they just shifted one guy so it's now it was unbalanced and now they're out? Do we keep it on pass it down? Is it 3rd and 10 and we're in our hawk call? And they're probably going to throw the ball and then they're in a balance. So are we going to, do we want to keep it in that? These are just questions that we ask ourselves and try to come up with the best answer. We play a little bit of goal line guard stuff in the personnel group. Sometimes we play nickel. Are we going to stay in those things, and how are we going to adjust it? Again, it takes a bunch of time. It's hard. It ain't always going to be right. We tell our players that, and we try to just make sure that they understand the importance of our communication. Here's some examples of what we play. Again, not all in the same year, definitely not all in the same week. So our terminology now is knock, new offensive center. So we're going to move the whole front, one man, play the call. Sometimes we're going to play our tight front, shift it to the unbalanced side. We're either going to angle or slant the front, shade to the unbalance. Our 2 coverage things, we have 2 different sets of coverage stuff as I went through before. And are we going to play one of those 2? We're going to try to play both of them, and what's going to be the reasoning behind playing more than one. So here's one example of just a base deal that we would do, right? So that would be A1 stuff. We go into this and we're teaching to our players, and we're saying, this is what we're going to start with. We're going knock left. Everybody's going one man. We're playing our tight front, which we call double toro. So we're basically angling to 4 eyes, and we're playing it from there. Pretty simple deal. Nothing earth-shattering. It's just the process that we go through in terms of determining what is unbalanced, teaching our players, and hopefully having them prepared for those things when they get there. So the next thing that we have is what we call fastball defense in terms of fast tempo deals, right? So how are we doing that? And what are we doing to structure our defense as we go through this deal? Okay. First of all, we're going to change our 3-word call to a 1-word call. So, we have field angle 4, and that turns into flash. So there's a one-word signal, there's a one-word call. And now if they see that, they know that there's a chance that they're getting ready to snap the ball, right? So they got to get a sense of urgency. And to me, we're always having to look for the why with our players. And one of the sense of urgency things about playing defense is we can go back and say, we're going to play this school and this school and this school. They're going to run some hurry up, and we got to be ready. You cannot stand around and wait. So again, those are things that try to help us be able to add a sense of urgency with our players. We got some drills. I go over what the fastball drill that we do in terms of creating the chaos that sometimes happens when people are going no huddle. So we tell our players again, so just like the unbalance, why is somebody going to go fast on offense? Offensive guys, some of them, they God bless them. Some of them love to just run plays, right? They think they're going to win the game if they run more plays than the other guy. I don't know. But, so they're going to run more plays. They're trying to tire us out. Obviously, there's a purpose to it other than just the number of plays that they're running. The stress of the defense, be able to not let us substitute and making it hard for the defense to simulate. When defense is practice, that's a difficult deal, right? So we're going to go through some of the things that we try to do to combat that or make our players ready for it as much as possible. So we also try to teach our players that some of this is to our advantage, right? They're not going to be able to go fast and sub at the same time. They're not going to probably motion shift a bunch. They're probably going to have a limited number of plays that they run out of the fast tempo stuff. The more that we see it, the more common it is, and the more comfortable that guys are playing with that tempo, playing defense with that tempo. And this is the last one's not easy because playing tempo offenses that are good is hard, right? For the reasons on the last slide. So but we try to convince them that it's to our advantage if we are facing a tempo deal. So our typical call system I just went over, we're going to move it from 3 words to 1 word, and it communicates to the defense that we're going to see something fast, we're going to turn around and get ready. And it also gives the ability to check with me if the offense does. We haven't seen a lot of that. We did see more of it last year. So that's something that, if they go check with me, then we can go check with me again and look over it and us change it. So, as we said earlier, our field and boundaries system makes it easy, right? We're not waiting to see a strength of formation, and we're not going to change those personnel. They're going to stay field and boundary. In the middle of the field, our field guys stay to the left. It's just the way we do it in terms of making it easy. But we're going to try to look the same. We don't have a lot of pre-snap movement. We have a little bit, but it's still looking the same, right? We're not trying to show them 16 different looks in terms of that. Our golden rule in terms of alignment, it affects everybody except for our front guys, our front 3 guys aligned to execute. So make sure that we're where we're supposed to be. And then, the movement stuff comes from the pre-snap movement, especially for us. It's going to be a safety deal and an outside linebacker deal more than anybody because we spin the safeties in cover 3 and we bring both outside linebackers, with different calls. So those guys are going to move if we think they are smart and experienced enough to still do it with a fast tempo, no huddle team. But that's one of the things that kind of goes out the window when guys are going fast. And I think that's one of the reasons why offenses do it, obviously. So our pre-snap operation, we're going to find the ball. The nose is going to make a field call. So if the ball's on the defense's left hash mark, he is going to find the ball, and he's going to go field right, field right. Our strong safety is going to line up to the field, and he is going to go field right, field right. And that way, if anybody's confused about where the ball is, especially as it gets closer from hash mark to middle, some of our guys need to know that to know which side they're going to line up on. And then they're going to get the signal. And I've got this in red and underlined because in terms of like I'm the signal for our defense. And if they don't get it in time, it's on me. And that's something that we try to go back all the time and ask them, are they getting it? And can we get it to them in time? And if as a defensive play caller and signaler, if you're waiting and they're going fast, then you're putting your kids in a bind. So I try not to do that, try to be aware of it as much as possible. So once they get the signal, they can communicate, align, get their eyes on the key, and then be able to understand if they didn't get it, as in the signal for the defense, and we're starting to get lined up, they better ask somebody, right? They better ask the guy that's closest to them, unless he ain't very smart. And then they better ask the guy on the other side of them or behind them or something like that. But somehow, some way, we all want to make sure that we're getting the same call, obviously, and then we are ready to play the call when the ball's snapped. So one of the ways we practice this, back to our 11 lines drill, all we're going to do, basically, I got a little diagram that shows you, but basically we're going to turn our players around, let the offense get set, and then the signaler is going to turn them around. So our signal will be down here, or maybe over here on the sideline, but so all of the players have to look away from the offense, right? There's none of them that can find what the offense is doing or any of that. All they're doing, they know where the ball is. We give them a signal, and we tell them, all right, go. And then they have to turn around, make a call, and then, you know, the people who are running this deal over here, and then the offense and the coach is ready to snap the ball as fast as possible. And sometimes we can make that a deal where we're snapping the ball faster than the offense ever would. And, you know, sometimes our players get pissed, and it's like, it's not fair. They can't, you know, there's no way they'd ever snap the ball faster. Well, if we practice it faster than they can go, then we'll be ready for it once they start going. So our fastball drill is probably one of the best things that I think that we do. We you know, when we play teams that are going to go fast tempo, I don't know that we do it enough. It does take a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of attention to detail, and when it's run right and it's run well, it's a great drill. And I truly believe it's one of those drills that applies and also can you can accomplish all four of these goals by doing it in terms of pace, in terms of preparation, in terms of conditioning. I don't think we have better football related conditioning field than this. And then also be able, once the stress hits, as in they're tired and they got to go and be able to get a signal and communicate and all of those things, it puts in that, you know, creating that environment that is as difficult as possible without being game situation. So here's the way we do it. I'm going to flip back and forth from the slide that shows it to the explanation. So we got two offensive scout teams, right? And they're lined up 30 yards apart. And sometimes they're on the same hash. More than often they're on the same hash. My diagram has them on opposite hashes, but they're going opposite direction, right? So we've got two coaches for each funnel at doing different things. So we need 6 coaches all together. It doesn't have to be all coaches. Sometimes it's players, that kind of deal. So coach for each funnel has play cards. We card this, right? It's not going to be play cards that have complex schemes up front. It's basically going to be pass or zone up front. And it's going to be something where most of the plays that we run in this deal are going to be perimeter screens, quick game stuff, or like jet stretch run plays on the perimeter, just so we can get guys running. And it's also easy for the offense to be able to figure out who and where to go in terms of blocking, routes, etc. So here's what it looks like. I'll flip back to it. So when we organize this, we've got a binder that has 3 plays in it. We've got a binder with this coach that has 3 plays in it, odds and evens, because they're going to switch back and forth in between, right? So when we do that, we also have a coach that is signaling for this group right here. We got a coach that's signaling for this group right here. We got a coach that's signaling the offensive line, the same as in the 11 lines drill. He's going to go pass, run right, run left. That's all they're going to do. So we're going to snap the ball for play 1. Let's say that it's a little spot screen out here. That guy's going to catch the ball out there. Our whole defense is going to run. There's going to be a fairly quick whistle involved in this deal. It's all tap off. There's no, you know, it's not going to be tackled to the ground like 11, or, you know, like any of our scout team stuff. None of our scout team stuff is to the ground anyway. But we're probably going to blow the whistle by the time 1 or 2 guys tap them off. And once we blow the whistle, they know once that play is dead, they are running over here to get reset for the next play. As soon as they run over there, the skill guys are all going to go to this coach, and they're going to figure out where their card is and what they're doing. So these guys are all getting set while this one's going on down here, right? So as soon as our defense gets down here and gets somewhere in the neighborhood of where they're supposed to be, their eyes are on the coach over here that's signaling for play 2. Those guys are ready. You can see it's pretty self-explanatory from there in terms of how we do it and what we're doing for that. Those guys are all going back and forth. And as I said, the diagram was hard to do with everybody on the same hash mark, but usually that ball would be on this hash right here, going this direction. That way, it's opposite defensive hashes, right? And there's fewer places for our players don't have to run as far because they're not running all the way across the field. Justin, you have a question on that? I saw you pop up.
No, I was just checking with you about the diagram. I wasn't sure if you had shared it already, but I see it up now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good, Coach.
If I screw that up again, let me know. All right. So again, this is something that coaching point wise, and I've already talked about some of these things, we try not to stop the drill. We're going to let mistakes roll. We're going to keep on going, right? The pace is faster than a game. Now, sometimes we slow it down a little bit, especially if there's something that we want to see or correct. There's no doubt there's a sense of urgency. There's got to be a sense of urgency with the scout players. Our coaches have to have a sense of urgency in this deal. You can see we usually run it on the same sideline. And I can't tell you this enough, because being the person who has tried to organize that deal, you spend time with drawing the right cards and getting 2 binders and odds and evens in the script for that thing, and then one guy screws it up, and that's a tough deal, right? Coaching wise, we've all been here before. So I would just tell you, the time involved, it ain't easy. We try to split it up in terms of coaches and responsibilities, but it's well worth it, and we believe that it's the best thing we can do to practice or simulate the tempo stuff. So in game, so some things that this is, most people, coach their players this deal, right? In terms of whether it be an opponent or just in general. But what are their tempo tendencies? What are they trying to do, right? We're expecting it to happen. If we think that a team has run tempo, we've seen it on film, we know we played them before, all of those things, it's going to happen. We tell our players it's going to happen at some point in the game. Don't be surprised and don't be pissed when it does. And to make sure we get the call in, right? We ask our players, when they come off, if that series just happened, and especially if we got gassed a little bit in terms of the tempo stuff and feel like it's getting to them, are you getting the call fast enough? And they got to trust you, right? Because they're not always going to say, you're screwing this up, coach. But, sometimes we know. We don't have to ask them. And sometimes you can look on your film and you can know. And here's an example, right? We're always trying to get better. And I can tell you, they're getting ready to snap the ball, right? And you can see all of our players are over there. I don't know where the hell I am, somewhere down there, trying to signal to them a defense and trying to figure out what's going on. And I think that's it's unfair to our players, right? It's putting them in a situation where they can't really be successful. So the last little part of this deal, this presentation is about opponent preparation. I'm not going to go through our whole deal, just a little bit of how we practice some of these deals that are not in like seminar, like not CLA, not inside, not team drills. These are just ways that we have gone about some of the recognition stuff and communication stuff. So, I'm sure all of you have heard of Sun Tzu. I'm not sure how many football teams he might have coached or any of that, but we can all learn a lot from him, especially when it comes to getting ready for opponents. So what are the difficult issues, right? We're going to start them on Monday in terms of the things that we've been talking about in this presentation. In terms of their formation, their motions, our tech, their shift, their imbalance, all of those things. So we're going to get most of our recognition stuff done in a form rec check, 11 lines kind of deal, right? We're going to start easy and progress throughout the week. So when we do this, the recognition, same as 11 lines drew, same deal. We're all going to get a key, we're all going to communicate, we're all going to get all that deal. We can work more things. Our coaches, our quarterbacks, quarterback spread something up. We can stop it. We can sometimes go fast. We can just stop the ball fast. We do want reps. We do want to coach it on the run, just like the 11 line drill. We want to keep everybody engaged as much as possible. And again, we can throw the tempo in there like I explained to you before. This is something that we don't do all the time, but often we'll throw our ones on defense and our twos on offense, and then switch them up. And one of the things that's humbling for our one defensive guys is to go over there, in the middle of the season and having to play scout team offense, and they're really not a whole scout team deal, right? It's just a form rec period. But I do believe that it helps keep them engaged, and it helps be able to have them understand a little bit more about what the offense is trying to do. So when we do this is, again, kind of old school thing, right? I'm not using any of the huddle playbook stuff or any of that. We're drawing these by hand. And this is just a sheet of paper with 6 boxes on it, is where we start. And the reason why I use this is because we can get 6 of them on there. I can fold it up and be able to show one of those blocks to a group of players that's about that big, and just tell 5 receivers where they're going, right? Five eligible receivers. They're color coded so everybody knows where they're going. There's no fun here to tell people like these are right. It's telling you who's got the signal, who's got the offensive line. We have 2 unbalanced checks that week, so we're using the unbalanced check that was called stop, right, and left for this period. So there's a defense on it already, so the center knows the defense. There's also a direction to the offensive line. The offensive line, whoever's protecting them, has to flip around backwards. We get used to that. So there's an offensive line action with that deal. You can see the highlighted things on there. This is it's one of the teams we played. Multiple tempos, unbalanced, shift offense, that kind of deal. So you can see what we try to get out of that period and what we're doing. This is just a little thing about one of the blocks, like what's it look like, right? I can't get great spacing in a little block like that with these 4 receivers, but I'm not as worried about that. But at the same time, I'm playing quarterback and running this deal, so I'm showing them after I drew this what the spacing is going to be. I'll explain it to them fast, get them out there, and be able to go. And if we use the same players for those guys multiple times, they start figuring out some of my, little deals in terms of drawing these up and trying to make them consistent in what we're doing. So that's the presentation, right? And I think this last slide is important because it's something to me that it's, while what we're doing is not near as important as what some of these other people do, like this guy who used to be an Army Ranger, but to me, if we can be calm because of our training, then we can just be ready to do what we're supposed to do, which is run fast, hit hard, play football, right? And so I think that some of these things have helped us be better at eliminating the noise and being able to put our eyes on a key and just be able to play football. And we're always looking for better ways to do it, right? We're always looking for ways to be able to improve playing the scheme that we play, but more than anything, be able to adjust to all of this stuff and run fast and hit hard at every position. So I haven't seen any questions pop up there, but that is what I have for this. I don't know if anybody else has questions. There's the contact information at the bottom. I don't know if it's good that nobody had questions or bad that nobody had questions, Justin, because all the ones that I've seen on here, there's been guys with questions. So I don't know what to say about that. But I appreciate everybody's time, and I hope that you got something out of it. I hope your time was worthwhile.
Absolutely, Coach. I appreciate you jumping on. If anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in that chat box. Obviously, Coach shared his contact information there, the cell and email. Also, if you go to the pinned tweet, you'll see his Twitter handle on there as well for any follow-ups or anything like that. But definitely, Coach, I really appreciate you jumping on with us. Like I said, I've been fortunate to see Coach Bruner a couple times in person and do some presentations, man. And like I said, he does a tremendous job over there. Definitely something, a great contact you want to reach out to. Coach, it was asked about the glossary, if that's something that you could send out.
Yes.
Okay. Just make sure, Coach, just make sure
email me, I can send it to you.
Okay, cool. Make sure, Coach said he'll be emailing you soon. Awesome. Anybody else have any last minute questions for Coach? Like I've been telling everybody, right, during this time, when we have more time on our hands, take advantage of reaching out to these coaches across the country and learning from them and getting better together because, we won't have as much time when we go back to normal. I think that's a given. So just make sure you're doing that, doing your part. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate Coach Bruner for jumping up and giving a great presentation, and just hoping everybody stays safe during this time. And of course, if there's anything that we can do coaching wise or whatever, feel free to reach out. Like I said, these coaches are more than willing. They've been gracious enough to not only come up here and present, but share their contact information for anybody to follow up with them. So appreciate everything that you do. Here's a question for you, Coach. I think he's asking what shade are you, Coach Shade, are you over the tight end with your outside linebackers, and why?
We are inside foot to outside foot, and at some points in time, we have widened them, like we're playing a big stretch team, that kind of deal, where we don't think we're going to see a lot of down block and have, less room to close to. But the reason we want to try to get reason why our base alignment is inside foot on outside foot, we want to try to put hands on our target, which is his near shoulder pad. So it gives us close enough to be able to have a chance to strike them and close enough to be able to have the aim and point that we want right there, so we can see exactly what's going on in terms of reach, base, or down block.
Coach, I'm sure you've been asked this question before in regards to the fastball drill, but obviously, say at a smaller school where you don't have, say, the numbers to kind of line guys up behind. Have coaches ever asked you about how to cater that drill to smaller numbers?
One, I've seen where people just use garbage cans for linemen and use skill players.
Okay.
Right. So then they're not as worried about, the lineman getting a key, that kind of thing. We have enough players where we're going to do that. So to me, that would be the first way to do it.
Okay.
And the second way to do it is use anybody and everybody that you have to be able to simulate people, and also the 6 coaches thing. Some of those jobs are not as hard as others. They just have to be described to be able to get a manager or another player to be able to do it.
Absolutely. What's your technique for inside backers taking on pullers on power?
We're a spill team with our inside linebackers, and that's something that we look long and hard at and changed to a spill team about 3 years ago. And I think that while we're not great at it all the time, it has made us faster, more physical, and also helped us be able to, make the ball bounce a little east and west. So we're a spill team.
Awesome. Anybody else? Any other questions for Coach before we wrap this session up? And once again, guys, the contact information's there. I know one of the coaches is going to shoot you an email here shortly. But, yeah, feel free to reach out and, continue to learn and grow together, guys. And appreciate you, Coach, for jumping on, man, giving us some time. And thank you for all the coaches who joined in with us this morning. Appreciate you.
Y'all have a good day.